The telephone has got to be one of humanity's greatest inventions. Being able to talk to someone over long distances instantly has had a massive impact on our lives. But have you ever wondered how it all started? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. It all started way back in 1876 when two separate inventors, Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray, both filed for a patent for a device that could transmit human speech via electrical signals. Now, the general idea of transmitting information using electrical signals wasn't anything new. After all, the telegraph had been around since the 1830s. But the difference between those two technologies is that with the telegraph you had to use a completely different device to decode the message. The telegraph could only spell out very basic messages using Morse code. So while very useful, it had its limitations. But coming back to Bell and Gray, the patent for their invention was filed on February 14, 1876, and after several months of deliberation, the patent was awarded to Bell. Although the outcome was far from certain, Gray actually came up with his design first, but his paperwork was just a bit too late. Anyway, Bell's first ever telephone only had a very limited range of around 1,800 feet. It also used an operator to switch the connection between the transmitter and the receiver. And this remained the status quo for quite some time. However, by 1878, the first transatlantic telegraph line had already been established. And just a year later, there were more than 200,000 telephones in use worldwide. These early telephones were often placed in public areas such as hotel lobbies or railway stations, and they would often ring to let people know that the line was free to use. In the early 1900s, an Australian named Henry C. Nicholson came up with the idea of putting the switching equipment inside the telephone exchange, which meant operators no longer had to manually switch connections. This allowed for much greater flexibility and the telephone network began expanding rapidly. Also during the early 1900s, the rotary dial was invented, which replaced the cumbersome hand-cranked operator system. The first rotary dial made its appearance in 1908, but it wasn't until the 1930s and 40s that it became widely adopted. Following the Second World War, transistors were invented, which eventually led to the first portable phone, the Motorola Dynatac 8000X, being released in 1983. At this point, mobile phones still had fairly poor reception and were extremely expensive, costing around $4,000 in today's money. But as the years went on, mobile phones gradually became more affordable and more practical to use. By the end of the 1980s, mobile networks were starting to become overcrowded, which led to the development of second-generation or 2G mobile networks, which allowed multiple users to share the same frequency, improving network capacity. It was also around this time that SMS or text messaging was invented, although it took a few years to catch on. During the 1990s, mobile phones became smaller and more advanced, with many new features such as internet access, email, and even the ability to send video messages. By the year 2000, there were more mobile phone users than landline users for the first time ever. As the 21st century progressed, mobile phones continued to evolve with new features such as GPS navigation, high-definition cameras and apps. Today, the smartphone is arguably the most powerful computer that most people will ever own, and they continue to get more advanced every year. And as for the future of the telephone, well, who knows? Maybe one day we'll be able to communicate telepathically, or maybe the answer to the question has been right in front of us all along. If you've enjoyed this video and want to learn something new, then why not check out our video on the evolution of the computer? We hope you've enjoyed it.